Don't touch it.
Okay, thank you. So that trend that's been very, very influential to us is a trend called gender blend. And I'm going to be sharing a lot of different aspects of the gender blend trend with you today. I'm going to break this down into 5 mini trends, which are different facets of the gender blend trend. And the first one is called female risen, which is about the rise of women onto the collective world stage. The next is a trend called masculine feminism. Then we're going to talk about post-gender, poster children, transculturation, and then slash and blur. So without further ado, there's the female risen trend. And this actually is kind of the second chapter of a trend that we identified last year, a trend called female rising, because we started to see this ubiquity of images of women gaining power, women taking the world stage, a real resurrection of the word feminism, and even some debate and argument that we're experiencing a 4th wave of feminism right now. Perhaps you've seen that Beyonce at MTV Awards last year, she performed this amazing performance, and as part of it, she had the word feminist flashing on the screen, and she defined the word feminism for tens of millions of viewers, a lot of them very young viewers too. Speaking of Facebook earlier, we're also seeing that social media sites like Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest are actually having the majority of users be females. And these users are creating images of themselves. They're starting dialogues about different topics that really matter to them personally. And so they're kind of permeating the world with new ideas of feminism and female power. And Salma Hayek recently said that social media is starting a peaceful revolution for women. In the US, of course, we have Madam Hillary Clinton, who just announced that she will be running for president. And many people believe that women are going to be deciding who the next president will be. And so it's really, really interesting to see all the different candidates trying to appeal to the women vote and talk about things like abortion and equal pay and maternity leave and things of that nature. So we're definitely going to be watching Hillary for sure. Still, the US is behind Mexico. Our Congress is actually only 19% women to your 37%. But we all have work to do worldwide before the numbers even up. And there's been a lot of conversation about this. And we believe that visuals are really going to be driving a lot of the change and the evolution here. Fabulous things are happening on the pop culture front. We're seeing a rise in female-led films and television shows gaining popularity, whether it's films like Frozen, Maleficent, and The Hunger Games that are breaking box office records. And this year, even more comic books and superhero stories will be female-led, including a new Supergirl television show and an all-female reboot of the Ghostbusters movie. We're also seeing women disproving that tired belief that women can't be funny, as we see television shows like Broad City, Inside Amy Schumer, and Girls all become runaway successes. And a lot of the humor is extremely feminist and political, and I don't know if any of you guys just saw the video that Amy Schumer just put out that's been going viral, where she has Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Tina Fey, and Patricia Arquette all having a very interesting conversation, we shall say, about if, as they age, if they're still attractive, although they use a much more colorful word. And then we're seeing female comedians also really rising in the commercial space. During the Super Bowl, we saw an incredible thing happen this year. Of course, traditionally, the Super Bowl used to be dominated by very macho, very traditionally male kind of advertising and conversation. And this year we saw a real uprising in commercials like these, featuring female comedians making all kinds of funny feminist points. So again, speaking of Facebook earlier, Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook's chief operating officer and arguably one of the wealthiest and most powerful and certainly successful women in business, if not the world. She made waves a couple years ago, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, by launching this book, which she called Lean In, where she talked about her challenges being a woman, trying to gain power, trying to be taken seriously, trying to forward herself in her career. And she decided, now that she's at the top, she really wanted to share life lessons with other women and encourage them to speak up, to raise their hand, to sit at the table with the men, to ask for more money, and so on. And this has started a whole movement, so much so that the term lean in has become part of our English colloquialisms. And she also started a nonprofit called leanin.org to continue raising consciousness and start things called lean in circles where women and men can get together and talk about equality. And all of this is aimed at encouraging women to become leaders in their careers and to seek equality around the world. We'll be talking about Sheryl in a moment. And then finally, we're seeing a lot of these kinds of conversations and debates as part of the female rising trend. And all kinds of commercials, like I'm sure everyone here has seen the Pantene commercials that went viral around the world. I'm talking about, when a woman has power, she's considered bossy. When a man has power, he's called the boss. All of these double standards and different behaviors that we have towards women with power versus men with power. And what's amazing here is a commercial like that, not only is it selling shampoo or conditioner, but it also becomes kind of a public service announcement. This goes viral, it's seen by tens of millions of people around the world, and opening minds of people who might not ordinarily be having these kinds of conversations or dialogues. We're seeing a rise in images of females in the STEM industries, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, and all kinds of proliferation of images of these different industries. And what's interesting to me is, the very obvious perhaps, but immediate visual cues that we see in images, whether it's a hard hat or a microscope or so on, that immediately tells you when you're looking at these images that this is about a woman in an alternative industry, and that it's a really good example, I think, of the phrase, if you can see it, you can be it. Images like these, they might seem like just an advertisement or just part of a commercial, but in fact, the more people see images like this, the more these images become normalized. And the more we can all, I think, put out images that promote equality, the more people ingest these images. It becomes part of their image diet, and it really changes expectation about what women can be. At Getty Images, we've seen this reflected in our customer buying patterns around the world. So what you see on the screen is our top-selling image of a woman in 2007 versus the Getty Images top-selling image of a woman in 2012, just 5 years later. And I think it tells a pretty obvious story. The woman on the left, she's very modelly looking, she's very perfect, she's naked, lying around, she doesn't have very much to do, she's potentially drugged, I don't know. She doesn't really seem very, very interesting. And yet the woman on the right, just 5 years later, she's still attractive, but what we all call in an aspirationally relatable way. She looks a little bit more like you or me. She is on a train, going on a journey, so she's the protagonist of her own story. She has forward momentum in her life, and she gets to wear clothing, which is very exciting. And then, this is a little bit hard to see on the screen, but this is our top-selling image of a woman in 2013. And here, we don't even care what the woman looks like, we care about the story that's being told here. We care about what she's doing, in this case, probably on social media or doing research. And then here's the top-selling image of a woman all of last year and still actually through to today. And I love this image because we still have some photographers in our industry who are a little bit more old school, and they still believe that in order for their images to sell, they have to put a woman in a bathing suit. And I think this kind of subverts that idea, because Here she's in a bathing suit, but she's powerful. She has agency. You can see her musculature. This is an image about poise, about strength, about being in charge and having power. So we're also seeing this reflected in the search trends on our site, what people are searching for on gettyimages.com. And globally, people are searching for the search term businesswoman. That's up 20% in the last 3 years. And then we analyzed Latin American countries collectively to see if this trend was holding true. And in fact, it is in Latin America. And just a caveat here, a lot of people still search on gettyimages.com in Latin America in English. So there's a combination here of some English, some Portuguese, and some Spanish stats. But as you can see, people are searching for search term female business executive. That's up 25 times in the last 3 years in Latin America. The Portuguese term for working women, up 5 times. For working mother, up 2.4 times. And we are seeing the inverse when it comes to more traditional portrayals of men and women. So the term businessman or businessmen going down 4 times, going down 2 times. The term for woman and kitchen going down 1.8 times. So there is this great inversion happening. So all of this is a bit of context for why we started a partnership with Sheryl Sandberg and her nonprofit, leanin.org. Last year, in February, we started a project on Getty Images called the Lean In Collection. And the Lean In Collection is a curated body of our images which show images of women in power, women who have agency, women who are ethnically diverse. It's a very global collection, and it's images of women who have poise, and even like the subtle visual cues of posture we pay attention to. We pay attention to images of groups of people, and we want to make sure it's the woman who's talking, if it's going to be an image in the Lean In collection, subtle things like that. We've also included images of girls doing non-traditionally female things. You'll see some of those in a moment. And of course, images of men who are being supported. So we're really trying to paint this kind of microcosm of what a world of equality looks like by creating this body of images in the Lean In collection. And for anybody who's not familiar with that, you can find these images by going to gettyimages.com/leanin, or just going to Getty Images and using that keyword, Lean In collection. So when we launched this collection a year ago, I have to say, it felt like the right thing to do. It felt meaningful, but we weren't entirely sure that this was going to be relevant for every single market around the world. We didn't know what kind of conversation it was going to spur. We didn't know how successful it was going to be. Well, just over a year later, I'm overjoyed to say that it's one of the most successful things we've ever done at gettyimages.com. The Lean In collection has been licensed in over 65 countries around the world, and in some of the furthest reaches of the world. And it's been really, really interesting to see the top-selling images in the Lean In collection, because it tells, I think, a really interesting cultural story. So what you see on the screen is our top-selling Lean In image in the United States. And I really love this image because often in traditional stock photos, you would see a woman buying shoes or shoe shopping. Well, here she is one of the entrepreneurs. She's a designer or some kind of marketer, and she is standing on equal footing, if you'll forgive the pun, with her male counterpart. They feel like partners, they're equal, and it's a very diverse image from an ethnicity standpoint. This is our top-selling Lean In image in Brazil, a small business owner who has really great personal style. This isn't about women trying to be men. It's not about women in power suits or trying to be hyper-masculine. And I think this is a great encapsulation of that. Our top-selling Lean In image in Japan, which proves that you can, in fact, have more than one businesswoman in an image, and they can talk to each other, and you don't need any men there, and it's still going to be a relevant image. This is our top-selling Lean In image in Mexico, and I think it's a really wonderful new version of motherhood, an empowered mother. This mother has grace, there's energy and vitality with her hair being windswept, And also it's a good reflection of the authenticity trend that's been happening, where so many of our customers don't want stocky cliche photos. We don't want to be making those. So something subtle like seeing that she has wrinkles and crow's feet is actually a pretty new trend in the last couple of years. Our top selling lean-in image in China, an image about precision, innovation, skill. Our top selling image in Colombia from lean-in, an image about female athleticism and independence. And finally, our top selling lean-in image in South Africa, which I think speaks to the education of young girls around the world and this idea that young girls are this really untapped resource. So it's also been really heartening to see how our customers are using these lean-in images. And I want to just give a shout out to these guys who gave us permission to share these examples. This is from Symantec, the huge technology company. This is from Scotiabank up in Canada. And I love this shot because she's a woman who really feels like a business leader. She has her own office, or at least a window view. And the tagline there says, "Richness is getting to do math all day." Lean-in image featured in a Visa campaign that was all about inclusivity. And also seeing these images used by journalists to illustrate their articles about feminism or about gender issues. We heard from a lot of journalists early last year when we first launched, and they were like, "Thank God you've made these pictures, because I'm trying to write articles about gender, and then I have all these crappy, cliche photos." You know, it completely works against the point that I'm trying to make, so we're thrilled about that. So, if we're going to have empowered women, and we're going to have a world of equality, what does that look like for men? And there is absolutely no threat here. The male businessman is not going away. We do not want to assassinate him, I promise you. But there is really a rise of kind of the new man, the new father, the new nurturing male that we're seeing bubbling up collectively in advertising right now. There's even a word that was just coined in the US around the time of the Super Bowl when all of the big commercials air, and this word is dadvertising. People seem to feel that this was the first year where the Super Bowl ads were kind of feminist. We had those funny women I showed earlier, and we had commercial after commercial about dads being more emotionally involved and about elevating fatherhood. And it's incredible to me to see traditional mother or mommy brands like Whirlpool, like Cheerios, like Dove, now telling the story of dad and showing that a man who's emotionally available and loving and nurturing, who's tender and affectionate, who physically touches their children with affection instead of just throwing a ball at them or playing with them or roughhousing with them, that this new man is something to be celebrated and something to aspire to. These new men are doing the cooking, they're doing the healing, they're protecting, and they're being used more and more in those traditionally mom-focused brands and products like Walmart and Knorr and Vicks. And even the household cleaning products are showing dad doing the cleaning. Swiffer is a big household cleaning brand up in the US. And this year they showed lots and lots of commercials featuring no women, just dad and the son cleaning the house together. Or this commercial, this is a still from, which showed what Ad Age called perhaps the most inclusive commercial ever made. Because you have a family that's mixed ethnicity, you have a father who's doing the cleaning, and for a bonus point, the father only has one arm. So very, very diverse, very, very inclusive. This Toyota commercial aired during the Super Bowl and featured American football stars talking about what fatherhood means to them. And it was a real turn because often, of course, football stars are shown to be really, really powerful and strong and rough, and this was the first time that a commercial really showed them being more tender and being proud of that tenderness and that love. We've seen this commercial from Nikon featuring a stay-at-home father looking after the kids while mom is in Southeast Asia providing medical care. And celebrity actor and new father Ashton Kutcher recently set Twitter on fire by asking for more diaper changing rooms in diaper changing tables, in men's restrooms. Sheryl Sandberg's latest Lean In initiative is called Lean In Together, and it seeks to encourage men to collaborate with women at work and pitch in to do more of the housework and the child rearing and make the world more equal. And we also have made a mini capsule collection called Lean In Together, and you can find these images of fathers and equal men and women collaborating at work by going to Getty Images and searching for keyword Lean In Together. And we're already seeing results. This image has been one of the top-selling images in Latin America since we launched the Lean In collection. And globally, images of fathers have been downloaded 23% more times in the last year. Awareness is being raised about how feminism is for everybody. It's not just for women. And lots of these kinds of conversations and these nonprofits are emerging to encourage men to advocate for female equality and to be allies. So Emma Watson gave these two incredible speeches at the UN as the UN Women's Goodwill Ambassador. And she's the international face for the He for She campaign, which celebrates and motivates male feminists. And I just learned of this beer brand that launched recently in Brazil. And it's both a beer, but it's also a political statement, since the beer industry traditionally is very, very sexist. So this is a feminist beer, and they were very careful to say that it's for women and men. So it's including both genders. There's a documentary film called The Mask You Live In that was just released, and it explores how the pressure of hypermasculinity leads to violence and depression and suicide in young men, and it encourages parents and teachers to get boys to communicate more and talk more freely about their emotions rather than bottling it up or exploding in anger. And even our President, Barack Obama, has been visibly leaning in together. He has done a number of things over the last year, and it's really interesting because, his 8 years are almost up. So Obama's like getting a little bit looser, and he's doing a lot of these kind of more risky, he's making more of these more risky statements, and I don't know, it's fun. We like this late term of Barack Obama. He's a hoot. But basically, Barack Obama, over Christmas, he talked about gender stereotypes and made sure to put sports equipment in the Santa bag that's intended for girls. He then held a press conference where he only called on female reporters to make a point. And then he was recently seen wearing a tiara with the Girl Scouts when the Girl Scouts came to visit him, which was a really powerful image that, of course, everybody was circulating. So speaking of children, that brings us to the third facet of gender blend. And, we've really entered a new age of gender-neutral or gender-fluid child rearing, as more parents believe that gender is socialized as much as it is biological. It seems like every week there's a new commercial that comes out that celebrates empowered girls. In this commercial, Lego positioned itself as a tool to help girls imagine and build so that they can become our future doctors or pilots. And then Verizon had their Inspire the Her Mind commercial, which shed light about the language we use when it comes to girls who love science or love to get dirty, and how we often try to keep them safe or try to keep them clean, and that ends up discouraging them from going into the STEM industries. And this is one of the most viewed commercials on YouTube in the history of the world. I'm sure most of you have seen it. The commercial for Always Feminine Products, which aired actually last year, but then they had a longer version that aired during the Super Bowl, which was, groundbreaking to have feminine hygiene products airing during the Super Bowl. And then also the fact that it had a message about how adults often use the phrase "like a girl" as an insult, as a descriptor for running or throwing or playing in a weak or foolish way. But then it showed how today's young girls actually don't hear the words "like a girl" as an insult, and they see it as a badge of honor. And when they were asked to throw like a girl, they just did it with a lot of power and force instead of the weak way. that a lot of people tend to relate that phrase to. On the flip side, we're seeing a more gender-fluid boy emerge. This image in J. Crew's clothing catalog came out 4 years ago, and it shows J. Crew's creative director, Jenna Lyons, painting the toenails of her son, pink. And when it came out, it caused this huge media storm and all this debate about whether this was okay, so much so that Jon Stewart called this Toemageddon. But this image seems pretty tame just a few years later, as we're seeing books like My Princess Boy become really, really popular, or having more public discussion about boys who like to wear dresses and play with dolls, and coming to some kind of belief that maybe this is okay. Maybe we don't want to shame somebody or stigmatize somebody for dressing like the opposite gender. We're also seeing parents resisting resisting dressing girls in pink and boys in blue. So children's companies like Tootsie McGinty are getting really, really popular, and they create clothes that are gender neutral and can be worn by either boys or girls. And Angelina and Brad Pitt's, they've been showing public support for their daughter Shiloh, who prefers to dress as a boy, and recently asked for everyone to address her, or him, we'll see, as John. And Toca Boca is the world's most popular children's app store, second only to Disney. And part of their ethos is to build gender-neutral games and to welcome all children to learn how to do anything. I love watching the toy industry and seeing how this is evolving. We're seeing companies like Goldie Blocks try to position themselves as the anti-Barbie and create dolls and toys that encourage engineering, or Lego releasing their first collection of female scientists. There's the Bronies, which are the boys who love My Little Pony, who are getting more popular. And a lot of this has been spurred on by the Let Toys Be Toys movement that started in the UK, but that's growing in worldwide popularity to encourage this sort of gender-neutral manufacturing and play. And Let Toys Be Toys just started a new chapter called Let Books Be Books, with the same idea that we shouldn't just have books with pink teaching girls how to cook and the boys get to be all the badass warriors, that we should have this more gender-neutral storytelling. So at Getty Images, we've been having an absolute ball. A lot of these kids are actually the kids of some of our photographers, and it's been wonderful to really allow them to celebrate their own children, or to come up with photo shoots that allow children to just be themselves and play across gender lines in this more gender-fluid way. So that brings us to the fourth wrinkle in the gender blend story, and that is the rise of the transgender population. The transgender community has become hugely visible and vocal, particularly in the US, thanks to much more visible people such as Laverne Cox, who is the transgender star of Orange is the New Black. She was nominated for an Emmy Award, and she's become a huge advocate for the transgender movement, and is arguably one of the first times a lot of US audiences and global starting to have really seen a transgender person be embraced so widely by Hollywood and by pop culture. She was also the first transgender person to be featured on Time magazine, and they did a great article all about how the transgender movement is perhaps the next frontier of the civil rights movement in the US. And that was just the start. We're now seeing all these movies and television shows come out celebrating the trans community. Transparent is an Amazon.com original show, and my colleagues at Getty Mexico told me that it hasn't made it down here yet, but it's hugely popular up in the States, and just won 2 Golden Globes. We have the Broadway show Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which was just revived and has won Tonys. And shows like Glee, or films like The Danish Girl that celebrate transgender people as well. Supermodel Andre Pajek publicly transitioned to be Andrea Pajek last year. And then we're seeing a lot more public discussion about the trans movement thanks to people like Lana Wachowski, who was of the formerly known Wachowski brothers, who directed the Matrix movies, Chelsea Manning, and right now all eyes are on Bruce Jenner, who the gold medalist and the Kardashian stepfather, who allegedly is transitioning gender. We're all gonna find out soon. There's gonna be a big interview with Diane Sawyer. Everyone's all fluffered about this. Our highest paid CEO in America is named Martine Rothblatt. She's a trans woman. And at home in New York City, we have Brooke Garden, who just received a lot of fanfare for being the first transgender firefighter. So this is bubbling up everywhere. And I learned that here in Mexico City, last November, there was new legislation passed to allow people to change their gender on their birth certificates without a court order. And Mexico City is also the first city in Latin America to allow for legal gender change on a birth certificate without a doctor's examination as well. So we're starting to see some brands embrace the transgender movement. And we predict this is only going to happen more and more so as this becomes more normalized and accepted by society. So on the top left, there was this Barney's department store campaign called Brothers, Sisters, Sons, and Daughters, which last year celebrated trans models and their families. We have Leah T, who recently became the face of Marriott, Gina Rosero, who became the face of Marriott, and Leah T, who just signed to become the new face of Redken Hair and Beauty, which is the first global beauty brand to use a trans model. And we're seeing our customer search reflect this as well, as customers are searching for keyword transgender 5 times more now than they did 5 years ago. And I'm going to end with a final piece in this gender blend trend that's happening. And that's a trend that we call slash and blur, which is essentially anything goes. It's this idea that gender is not a binary, it's in fact a spectrum, and it's fluid, and people can mash it up and play on all sides of it. And we're seeing this over and over again right now in media, in pop, and in fashion. So I think a great example of this is Conchita Wurst, who won the Eurovision Song Contest as the whole world cheered her on. For those of you who don't know Conchita, she is a bearded drag queen, and she later walked the catwalk for Gaultier and has become a real muse there. She became a spokesmodel for Parrot headphones, and she's been seen at the Oscars and all kinds of big celebrity fetes as well. Most people back at home did not know who this was until last week, when a very racy video hit all of our feeds. Perhaps some of you know what I'm talking about, but Adamowski recently unveiled his new androgynous alter ego, and I think it's a really good example of that kind of David Bowie-esque gender blending and androgyny coming back into popularity. We're seeing images that blur gender being used to promote films. Even Starbucks recently had this whole drag queen commercial. Equinox Gyms subverts gender by showing a commercial and print ads that have trans models, androgynous models. Also this power couple where the man is the caretaker and the woman's the really strong, badass one. And in fashion right now, this is absolutely ubiquitous this year. DKNY Menswear has a campaign featuring the female Cara Delevingne as their model. We're seeing Jill Sander launch her line with this very, again, David Bowie kind of androgynous campaign. Balenciaga, Absolute. I think that's a great example because that stars Gisele Bündchen, who is usually the most fantastic, audacious, curvy woman with flying hair everywhere. And here we see her with a cropped look and very, very tailored clothes. Givenchy using ordinarily very feminine Julia Roberts as their spokesmodel with minimal makeup, tailored clothing. She has a very straightforward gaze. She's not doing the coquettish fashion thing. It's this very strong power pose. And one of my favorite examples from this year is the ways in which Rihanna is playing both sides of the gender spectrum in the same day. These are both images that we shot of Rihanna first arriving at the Grammy Awards, looking very fluffy and pink and feminine and like a walking cupcake. And then just a couple hours later, she performed on stage with Paul McCartney and Kanye West in this more ill-fitting men's suit. We're seeing females who really want to wear men's clothes and now finally can find men's clothes that are tailored for their bodies, such as St. Harridan, which is a really big line at home. Also, it must be mentioned, you know, as same-sex marriage is getting legalized in different states in the US, a lot of women need tuxedos, really, because they are getting married. And so companies like this are actually starting new industries to support females who want to wear a tuxedo to their wedding. In Latin America, we're seeing androgynous fashions pop up, fashions that can be worn by men, by women, more unisex. And this is happening for men too, by the way. Lots of coverage about different fashion weeks around the world showing men wearing lipstick, wearing lace, wearing dresses. Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith's son, Jaden, he's now wearing dresses all the time on social media. And Selfridges, the big department store in the UK, recently launched their campaign, Agender, where they reorganized 3 floors of their department stores to be completely unisex. So they don't have male clothes or female clothes, they now have clothes for everybody, and they have a lot of great campaign work around it. And here in Mexico City, I just learned that there's this line, Man Candy, that sells menswear for men and women as well. Facebook, you know, the harbinger of many, many social changes, has over 50 genders that you can now self-identify as, and you can even write in what gender you want to self-identify as now. And, you know, obviously at Getty Images, we've been doing a lot of shooting around androgyny and gender blending and using gender as a spectrum. We're really interested in this non-duality, so much so that we just a few weeks ago changed our model release form so that, you know, if you are a model, you no longer have to select male or female to be in one of our shoots. There's now a third gender option where you can write in how you gender identify for gettyimages.com. So that is basically an overview of the gender blend trend. Just a few takeaways. We are seeing a lot of brands and a lot of visual content makers who are flipping the script, who are having females in more positions of power and men in more positions of support and collaboration. We're seeing a rise, again, of feminism and our belief that feminism is for everybody, it's not just for women. We're getting away from this idea of pink for girls and blue for boys and coming up with this more gender-fluid way of socializing and raising our children. We're seeing people embracing the trans movement, and this is only going to grow and grow. And we are truly, truly interested in this idea of gender as a spectrum rather as a duality or a binary, and are celebrating a lot of images that explore that nuance as well. So if you've enjoyed this, you can read much, much more by going to the Getty Images blog, which is stories.gettyimages.com, and you can read a lot of my team's articles about gender and other visual trends. And then finally, if this interests you, you can also find on Stories and Trends our ebook, it's called Creative in Focus, and this goes over many, many more trends than the ones I shared with you today, so I hope you'll join us there. Thank you very much. Does anybody have questions? No? Okay. We just wrap it up.